So how many Americans have actually saved $1 million or more for retirement? And the number is going to surprise you, right? I think it's the gold standard. We're all shooting for that. And unfortunately, it's super, super hard to save $1 million for retirement. So if you're not there yet, if you're far from there, I don't want you to feel stressed. So we're going to go through the numbers, how many Americans have actually saved this amount of money. And then I'm going to share with you some characteristics of the types of folks that have been able to do it. And finally, I'm going to close the video with sharing with you what you can do if you're not there yet to speed up the process and get yourself there. Okay, so let's jump in. This is according to an article by The Accent, which is a branch of the Motley Fool. And the article is called How Many People Really Save $1 Million for Retirement? Okay, so let's jump in. And if you look at the first $0 to $10,000, $0 to $999,000, that's 58.4% of Americans. So that's not much money. And unfortunately, that's almost 2/3 of all, it's over half of all Americans have saved less than $10,000 for retirement. And then $10,000 to $99,999 is another 20%. So over 3/4 of all Americans have not saved their first $100,000. And there's a famous quote by Charlie Munger, I'm paraphrasing it. Charlie Munger was Warren Buffett's right-hand person. And Charlie says, you need to do what it takes to save your first $100,000. Even if that means packing lunch every day, even if that means taking the bus instead of owning a car. Charlie was a little extreme, but his saying, which was actually in 1994 to a business school class, his saying was, do what you need to do to save that first $100,000, and then you can ease off the gas a little bit. Unfortunately, $100,000 now is not what it was in 1994, right? I mean, that's 30 plus years ago that Charlie said that. I think that number's 250,000. So saving that first 250 is really important. And then your money starts working harder for you. And that's why Charlie says you can ease off the gas, because at that point, the money you've saved, the compounding, the earnings on that money can benefit you, and you don't have to save as much from your paycheck. Okay, and then continuing this article, $100,000 to $500,000, it's another 14%. So now we're at almost 90% of all Americans have saved less than $500,000. And $500,000 is a lot of money. But that's what the number is, 13.9%. And then 500,000 to just under $1 million, 999,999, is another 4%. So now we're getting to the crux of the matter. But again, I want you to stick with me, because I'm going to share with you some characteristics of the people that have saved this. And I'm going to close the video with what you can do, importantly, to start catching up if your goal is to get to $1 million saved. How do you get there? $1 million to $5 million, it's 3.1% of Americans. So how many Americans have saved for retirement $1 million or more? It's 3.1%. And then there's another 0.1% that have saved $5 million. So it's 3.2% in total between those two that have saved over $1 million for retirement. So if you're not there yet, if you're far from there, you have good company. Only 3.2% of Americans have done that. Let's look at this data a couple different ways. The next thing I want to talk about is a report by Statista.com. And here they show the number of millionaires in the United States. Now, this is the net worth outside of your home. So this is everything that you have of value outside of your home. which for most of us is our largest asset, right? So it's really the value of all their bank accounts, their IRAs. I should say that earlier article was for retirement accounts only. So that's IRAs, that's 403Bs, that's 401Ks, retirement tools where you get, the government gives you a tax advantage to save money in those accounts, either a regular IRA, regular 401K, or a Roth version of that, where you don't get the tax break going in, but then when you pull the money out later in retirement, you don't have to pay tax on it. So this is from Statista, and it shows the number of millionaires in the United States since 2006 through 2020. And you can see in 2007, we had a period peak there with 8 million millionaires in the 8 million households were millionaire households in the United States, again, outside of their home. That number fell to 6 million in 2008, which was the great financial crisis. It increased, it's almost doubled since then. So in 2019, just before the start of the pandemic, it was 11 million, and surprisingly, that number actually went up to 11.6 million, almost 12 million, so almost a double since 2008 of how many millionaire households there are in the United States. There's also a report from the Wall Street Journal that shows this in a bar graph, and I'll just show the whole table here at once so you can see it. This data, and I should reference that Motley Fool article earlier, their source of that information was EBRI, Employee Benefits Research Institute, I believe is what that stands for. And this is the same source, just showing it a different way in graphical format. Now, importantly, earlier I said that these were the numbers for retirement accounts. So what's our net worth? I showed the number from Statista that shows how many millionaires there are in the United States with net worth out of the house. But let's look at this table here. And for people, this breaks it down by age. And this is for the Survey of Consumer Finance, which is sponsored by the Federal Reserve. So it's very legit data. And it shows it by age, the median net worth. Half the people have more than this, half the people have less. And for people that are less than 35 years old, you can see the number, the median is under 100,000. 35 to 44 years old, the number is a little over 135,000. For 45 to 54 years old, the number is a little under 250,000. 55 to 64 years old, the number is almost 365,000. Now this is total, this is median net worth including the home. Very important. So half the people in America, and this data is as of October, well, it's the Survey of Consumer Finance for 2022. Takes the government a while to crank out all the data. It came out in October of 23, so it's very recent data. The survey is done every 3 years, so it's the most recent data we're going to have for a while. So 55 to 64, the number is 365,000. 65 to 74 years old, the number is a little under 410,000. So that's when people first retire. They actually see their assets increase. And then 75 plus, it goes back down to about 1/3 of $1 million. Okay, now I want to share characteristics. You know, it's easier for some people, or it should be easier for some people, to save $1 million than others. So I want to share with you this article by Motley Fool Wealth Management titled, "Are You in the Top 3% of Retirees?" And it shows that the top savers have a lot in common. Now, you don't need to have these characteristics in order to do it, right? Rule number one is no matter how much money you're earning, you need to spend less than what you earn. So you need to save. And rule number two is, unfortunately, it's not enough to just save. We also have to invest that money. We need to be beating inflation over time so we can get compounding working in our favor. Okay, but these are the characteristics that this article came out with. It's the first characteristic is high income. That's not a given. over half of all Americans making $100,000 a year or more don't save a dime. But it's a lot easier to save money if you're high income. And what they found is the people in the top 10% of household incomes, they've saved almost $770,000 retirement. And believe it or not, these are the top 10% of income earners. They have a net worth average of almost $5 million. And for comparison, if you look at that middle quintile, so this is, 40% of Americans, what would it be, 45? So if you break it into 5 quintiles, so 20% categories, right? You've got the lower 20%, you've got the next 20%, which gets us to 40. So people in the 40 to 60% bracket, they have retirement savings of 80,000 instead of that, almost 1/10. They have 79,000 instead of almost 790,000 for people in the top 10%. And instead of an average net worth of almost $5 million, they have a net worth of almost $250,000. Home ownership is a key here in the United States, specifically in the last 30, 40 years. Owning a home has worked out very well for people. The average homeowner has $303,000 saved for retirement, which is almost 3 times what the average renter has. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, right? I mean, people that are renting, it's oftentimes because they can't afford a home. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The average homeowner in the United States has a net worth of a little over $1 million, and the average renter has a net worth of less than 1/10 of that, a little under 100,000. And then education, what they show here is people, the average college graduate has a net worth of $1.5 million compared with about a third of that, $300,000 for somebody with a high school diploma but not a college diploma. So those are characteristics. But again, what can you do to catch up? Before I go there, I do want to talk, what can you do if you haven't saved $1 million? What can you do to catch up and to save more money? And before I jump into that, I do want to share this breakdown of just concentration of wealth in the United States. So if you're almost in the top 10%, if you're in the top 1 to 9%, but you're not in the top 1% yet. That's over a third of U.S. wealth is held by people that are in that top 10%, but not the top 1%. The people that are in the top 1%, but not in the top 1/10 of 1%, have a little over 15%, 16.7% of the wealth. And the top 1/10 of 1% have $13.6 million. For people that are in the upper half, but not in the upper 10%. They have almost the third of U.S. wealth. But here's the thing. The lower half of all Americans own just 2.5% have just 2.5% of the wealth in the net worth in the United States. Okay, so what can you do if you need to catch up and you're not where you want to be? Job number 1 is just start saving. Right. Again, no matter how much that you're earning, you need to spend less than what you earn, and then we need to invest it. So those are the 2 main rules. So how do you get there? First off, we were raised, I think, most Americans were raised saying, save 10% of what you earn and you'll be fine. But unfortunately, that's our father's generation, our mother's generation, and that's not our generation. There used to be 4 legs to the retirement stool, right? One was a pension. Unfortunately, most of us don't have a pension anymore. If you do have a pension, good for you. So one was a pension. The second one was buy a home, right? Homes generate wealth for us. The third one, Social Security. That's still critically important. Over half of all Americans are planning on Social Security to pay half or more of all of their expenses in retirement. So again, we've got a pension, we've got own a home, we've got Social Security, and then the fourth leg of this bench, if you will, this foundation for our retirement, is the money that we save. But because most of us don't have pensions, because Social Security for many of us is going to be taxed, is not as powerful as it was a generation or 2 generations ago. The taxation of Social Security only started in the 1980s, and then unfortunately the amount of our Social Security that could be taxed increased in the 1990s. So that's a fairly recent thing. So that fourth leg, saving our money, is super important. 10% is better than 5%, it's better than 9%. And I know it's aspirational, but I think we need to shoot for 20%. And if you're thinking, hey, Azul, there's no way that I could save 20%, let me give you an idea. There's a fast way to get up to saving 20%, and there's a slow way. Let me give you the slow way first, because it's easier. And that is, every time you get a raise, every time you get a promotion at work, every time you get a windfall, unexpected money coming in, half goes to current you and half goes to future you. So if you get a $10,000 raise, congrats, that's a big raise. Easy math for me, which is why I gave it. Half of that $5,000 goes to current you, and half of that $5,000 goes to future you. And I would argue do that in after-tax dollars. So if the government's going to take $2,000 of it, you've got $8,000 left after taxes. So $4,000 for current you and $4,000 for future you. So that's the slow way. It's going to take you a while, but hopefully over time you will get close to 20%, maybe even more. The fast way is to just bite the bullet and to test drive this budget. And this budget's not for the faint at heart, but a lot of us can do it if we set our minds to it. But it is sacrificial, it is painful. And that's what I call the 50-30-20 rule. Try to keep of your take-home pay, try to keep your needs, things like your rent, your utility, gas for your car, food. Try to keep your needs, not eating out, but food, groceries where you're cooking at home. Try to keep your needs at 50% or less of your take-home pay. Try to keep your wants, the things that you don't need but make life more enjoyable, going out to eat, going to see a movie, date night, going on a nice vacation as opposed to a camping vacation or a lower cost vacation. Try to keep in the things that come in cardboard boxes to our house all the time. Try to keep your wants to 30% or less. So 50% for your needs, 30% for your wants of your take-home pay. And if you can do that, that leaves 20% to save in your 401k, your IRA, your taxable account, however you save it, that leaves 20%, the 50-30-20 rule. And if you like these kind of videos, if you want to see how other people are doing, I know that you'll enjoy watching this video here that talks about the average income in retirement here in the United States. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in that one. Bye-bye.